So for today's conversation, we're gonna spend the first kind of 35 minutes. I have prepared some questions for the mayor. Had a really great opportunity to read his book, which I encourage you all to take a look at as well. So we're gonna talk a little bit about his book, his leadership style. We're gonna spend some time thinking about what are some lessons to be learned from Manchester as well as Austin. For those of you who do not know, the city of Austin and the city of Manchester have a sister city relationship. So we are exchanging of ideas here. And one of the reasons that the mayor is in town is for South by Southwest, along with 300,000 of our other friendliest people in Austin, but also to sign the agreement with the city here around the sister city relationship. In addition to that, we'll spend some time just talking about lessons learned as it relates to leadership. And then we'll give you all some opportunity to ask some questions as well at the end of the conversation. So that's how we plan to spend our time today. So first and foremost, let's talk a little. How many of you have ever been to Manchester? Anybody been to Manchester? Okay, a very good name. Very good. So Manchester's a really interesting city. For those of us that study cities, it is a city that is about 2.3 million residents kind of in the region. But one of the things that I'm fascinated by your city, thank you, by your city is the idea of how much sort of economic transition has happened in that city, right? And the fact that you have really transitioned from what was truly an industrial hub to this digital creative economy, right? Which is a lot of similarities that we have here in Austin. So a little bit about the mayor. The mayor was elected to Parliament in 2001. The mayor served in Parliament for about 16 years. And then in 2017, was elected as the mayor of the Greater Manchester, and then was recently, in 2001, re-elected as well. He's done some really interesting things that we'll talk about as it relates to transportation, particularly your B network. As a city that's investing in transportation, I see the little B pens. We're excited to talk a little bit about that and talk more about what are some lessons to be learned there. And then in addition, he's got a new book out called Head North, which we'll talk about some of the lessons that are learned there. So Mayor, perhaps we can start with your kind of talk to us a little bit about your leadership journey, particularly starting out in a sort of national politics space, moving into this regional leadership role. What motivated you to make the transition?
Well, thank you, Steve, for hosting this, and everybody for coming. It's a great honor, as I said, and so amazing to see you all here. My journey, so I was, as you just said, in the UK Parliament. So I served as a minister in Tony Blair's government, and then in the cabinet for Gordon Brown. And my journey sort of took me to a decisive moment, and it's described in the book, where I was a minister responsible for sport in the UK, and I was invited to the 20th anniversary of the Hillsborough disaster at Anfield Liverpool Football Club's ground. And having been born in Liverpool, which is, you might say, a bit odd to be mayor of Greater Manchester and born in Liverpool, it shows how open-minded Manchester is, doesn't it? That they elected you from Liverpool. Could somebody from Dallas be mayor of... Austin?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, good. Well, Austin is like us then. I from the city, but in that moment, I was representing a government that had, in many ways, not challenged the cover-up that had gone on with that disaster. In short, the Liverpool supporters have been blamed by the authorities for the death of 97 of their own fellow supporters, to deflect blame from the police and the authorities. It was a terrible thing, but I knew that, and I had to decide whether to go. And the reason I tell this story is because it kind of was the change moment in my political journey. I'd been in a Westminster system that I struggled with because of its London centricity. I'm, proud from the Northwest, born in Liverpool. My dad gets a job in Manchester when I was 1. I live and breathe it, everything about it.
Yeah.
And yet, had gone through this journey through Whitehall, which is, the White House equivalent, let's say, in the UK, and just seen how the country was wired against the north of England, to the point where an entire city, Liverpool, was crying injustice for 20 years. and no one listened. And this cover-up stood all that time. So I went there, and in going there, basically took my steps off the path I was on. I was ambitious as a young man, becoming a minister, getting these amazing roles. And at that point, my kind of professional life came into a head-on collision with my personal life. And I basically decided then to back the people I grew up with. And I succeeded with others in reopening Hillsborough. And we then succeeded in overturning the verdict of the first inquest to one of unlawful killing, which is now the verdict. But it was that experience that took me out of the Westminster system and into this role when it was created. And that, I guess, describes my leadership style to answer the question. I got to a point in politics to say, well, you all have to ask, why am I actually here? Mm-hmm. What is the point of being here? Is it for ambition or is it to do something?
It's a question I wish that more politicians in the United States ask, for sure, right? We're kind of at that moment.
Well, I did. I mean, I did ask myself that, and if anything kind of brought me into politics, it was this sense of unfairness about the north and the south of England, the sense of two countries, very different. Yeah. And I guess it's a feeling you might have in Texas, is it? That New York or LA or Boston and the Ivy League gets all the attention, and somehow Texas, with all the amazing things happening here, doesn't get the same focus as it deserves.
Yeah, I mean, in Texas, the invert is that we live in a state that has, for such a long time, had such a focus on rural communities, and a lot of times our cities, actually, where you're sitting today, do not get enough attention. Actually, it's an interesting kind of dichotomy here. Curious to know, as you are, thinking about your experience, sort of in the national space, what lessons learned did you take from that experience and apply to your role as mayor?
It's about the voices of people that you trust, isn't it? And listening to them and actually acting to do something that you know to be true. I could have gone to Anfield that day and read out the speech that the government wanted me to read, but I didn't, and it changed me then as a politician. In some ways, I became independent. Someone briefed at the time that I had left the reservation. This was one of the advisors to the then leader of the Labour Party, but they were right. I realised that I couldn't be the politician I wanted to be with the Westminster system of a party whip, where you're told to vote in this way and you're told to say this type of messaging when you go on the television. I realized I couldn't do that because I would have appeared a fraud to the people I grew up with. Mm-hmm. And basically that is what I kind of came to the conclusion, that the political structures at national level, there's a reason why politicians don't connect with the public. They take a kind of an approach that immediately sets people at odds with the public. The public don't think party first. They just don't, do they? Politicians think party first. The public thinks place first. What about my place, where I live? What about my home? What about my kids' education? That's how they think. But it's weird how politics doesn't start from the same place as the public. We're meant to be people who represent them and seek their votes, but we kind of operate in the wrong mode, I think, too much. So in the end, I kind of stepped out of the tribal politics, and I had to work with the Conservatives in the UK to get Hillsborough reopened. Theresa May, who became our Prime Minister, I worked very closely with her. And I actually realised that is where political change happens, when you reach out and you kind of work with somebody who you didn't expect to. That actually is where the magic happens in politics. And it's why what's going on in the world at the moment troubles me greatly, because the change won't be profound. It won't be changed by consensus,
it's changed by collaboration, right? I mean, particularly with folks that you agree with.
And I really have this kind of passion now about place first rather than party first. Now, I sound like I don't have my relation.
No, I mean, you're describing what, the great Ben Barber wrote a great book called If Mayors Ruled the World, and he speaks about this, right? This is one of the things that he says, if our world would be in a much better place in a governance if mayors and the idea of direct leadership, because of this idea of place and the importance of place, played a larger role in the way we thought about the way we did our
I think it
built
should
our
be
politics.
the starting point for US and UK politics, because it's a unifying force place, isn't it? You know, it brings people together. We all want this place where we live to go forward. And that means, you know, people of different voting persuasions have common ground. We've got to get back to the idea of common ground in politics. The idea of winning elections by firing up a base so far that just gets you over the line is in the end, I think, a dangerous form of politics. And it happens on left and right. I'm not making a critique here of just one party or
and to your
one
point,
personality.
Sometimes in the States here, particularly when we think about our cities and our urban communities, a lot of times the fringe actually doesn't happen on the right; it actually happens on the left. We push on the extremes of the left sometimes.
Yeah, so the left is as bad in many ways in terms of, you know, factionalism and.
You must have read my work.
I stood twice, unsuccessfully, to be the leader of the Labour Party, and I kind of made loads of mistakes myself. And I lost to Jeremy Corbyn, who, what would the equivalent be, Bernie Sanders in the US sort of scene. And it's because I think I probably didn't do the politics as well as the organisation of people who are playing factional politics is a level above. I always had more support in the public than I ever had in my own party, but that you have to have a degree of organisation and, you know, the ability to take positions within your party. But in the end, I'm glad I'm not that type of politician, and I don't want to go back to that necessarily. Although I haven't necessarily ruled out a move back to national politics. So there may be a sequel called Head South in a few years' time.
So Mayor, I have a lot of my students here, and that are interested in urban economic development and the idea of cities. And so I'd love to talk about your time as mayor and some of the things that you've done. One of the things that's unique about your role as mayor is that you are mayor of a large regional system. That's a unique opportunity here in the state. So there are only a handful of communities where you get a mayor that oversees a large regional area. Talk a little bit about the idea of how that larger jurisdiction maybe has an impact on your approach to governance.
It's a really good point, and I think Greater Manchester is quite unique, not just in the UK. I think even in a global situation.
Yeah.
The leader of Manchester City Council is with me on this trip, Councillor Bev Craig. I think she's at the back of the room. She and I did a speech in Belfast last year, and we came up with the phrase to kind of describe Manchester in terms of what we are right now. We used the phrase, the most highly networked city in the world. And I believe that to be true. It's a feature of how Manchester has always worked. It is collaborative. The B is the symbol for a very important reason. The 10 councils always work together. But that has built really incredibly strong partnerships, then public to private, public academic, to the community. And we have a devolution deal from Westminster where we pioneered the idea of city-region devolution, where power is taken out of that Westminster system that I got so frustrated with and is used at our level, power over transport, over planning. Obviously, I'm responsible for policing in Greater Manchester, the fire service, health. I have a role over the health service in Greater Manchester. You basically have got, you know, all of the things in the mix in a highly integrated, highly networked system that is also working with the private sector, as I say, with our universities and others. And that is the sort of the gold dust of our system. When we decide on something, you know, be it a relationship here with Austin or something more fundamental about the reform of public transport, which we're going to get on to discuss, the beauty of it is the whole place moves in that direction. And everyone plays a role. We've got businesses in the room, got ACOM in the room, but from Greater Manchester, University of Manchester is in this room. I hope none of them will be sitting there thinking, oh, it's not always like that. I hope you feel it is like that. that we do move as a society. We've just been learning about Lyndon B. Johnson's Great Society. Well, I think that is what we are. We are a place that is really, as I say, highly collaborative. And that's where I think social change happens. It's got to be long-term. You have where you're going and you stick to it, but you get everybody facing in the same direction, everybody pulling in the same direction. That's what makes the difference.
There's got to be challenges to that, though, in terms of governance. What are some of the challenges of governing at a scale like that?
Funding would be the main one. We're constantly, and we're still fighting these battles with Westminster. The UK is wired for inequality, I'm afraid to say. And this is the conclusion of the book, which I wrote with the Mayor of Liverpool, actually. So it does show we are collaborative beyond our borders as well. I was a minister, as I said, in Gordon Brown's government. I was Chief Secretary to the Treasury. And I'll just explain this, just so you can understand why London is what it is and the north of England is what it is. I was asked to put together a funding package for something called Crossrail, which is now the Elizabeth line, named after the late Queen Elizabeth. And it's a modern, amazing piece of public transport infrastructure in London. And so here I was as Chief Secretary to the Treasury, and I said to the Treasury, His Majesty's Treasury, okay, I will do this, but I am not just announcing a massive railway for London. Where's my project for the North and one in the Midlands? And I want to do it as a package.
Yep.
Nothing came back. Right, getting nearer to making the announcement. Where's my list? Nothing. Eventually, it was like a day before. I said, "Listen, I'm fed up with this. I wanted a list of regional projects. Where is it?" And they said, "Well, there isn't one, Minister." I said, "Well, why?" None of it passed the Green Book. And the Green Book basically is the framework that they use to assess public investment. And it's on an economic test. So which projects will give most back within 25 years, basically is the test. And that means that the places that have most constantly get more.
The most, yeah.
Constantly get more. And the places that need it and need the kind of infrastructure to kickstart economic development are left struggling. And that basically, you asked me the challenge, that still remains our big challenge, to just get fairness for the north of England within a very unfair London-centric British political system. We are, but what's interesting is Manchester is starting to break this apart. The success of what we're doing is undeniable. There are people down there who would want us not to succeed. We have had 3% economic growth for the last decade. 3%.
That's great.
Higher than the UK average. That's only 1%. So we're fastest growing city in the UK, and obviously why we're very much in tune with Austin and all of the amazing growth that's happened here. Interestingly, I describe in the book being a young man, having been born in 1970, went to Cambridge University, but went back to Manchester, wanting to stay in Manchester to pursue my career, but couldn't find anything. And like most of my generation, born in the north of England, to get on in life, you had to go south to London. Mm-hmm. The reason I'm telling you this is, in the last 3 years since the pandemic, net 13,000 young Londoners have moved to Manchester. Finally, we are reversing that. And there are people in London who don't like this success story, but it's becoming undeniable. And we have a UK government now focused on growth, and the growth story is Manchester.
Yeah, that's great. Can we talk a little bit about transportation? Talk a little bit about the B network? Can you tell us? I mean, to me, I
think we might be able to help a bit here, because I think you may be.
I would love to know tell us a little bit about lessons learned. We're trying to build a transit system here.
I don't want to be boastful, because we've got so much to learn from this great city. Well, maybe we can help.
But I think you've nailed on transit probably better than we have.
We might be able to help on soccer a little bit.
We had a very good first season, not a very good outside since.
It's so great at the moment, but we may be able to help there. But on transport, yes, I mean, this is the symbol of a new public transport system for Greater Manchester. In 2 weeks, 2 weeks today, in fact, we will have just gone to a full integrated system. So basically just to tell you what that means. We've got the largest tram system in Europe. You know, you've got a tram system, haven't you? But ours is, I don't know, probably times 10 or even 20. I don't know. But it's much.
We have a line, my friend.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we have
that runs on a freight line. It's yeah.
So what it means is from a week on Monday or 2 weeks today, you will just have your bank card and you just will tap it in on a bus or a tram, and it's capped, and it's like the London system actually. So people will only pay up to the cap, no matter how many trams or buses they use. Absolutely, we're going to a low fare system. And I think Austin, and we were talking with Mayor Watson yesterday, who've got a huge regard for, you know, we're really ready to help see how we could, see the same, which I know is the vote of the public here, wasn't there? That
6 and 10.
Yeah, we can absolutely help. But for me, you know, if you think about the coming generation, young people, many of whom don't necessarily want to own a car, I think we should be really bringing very low cost public transport, high quality public transport to our cities. It completely brings social mobility, doesn't it? If people can afford to get around. I give our 16 to 18-year-olds a free travel pass because at that age, I want, you know, not one of them to be held back because of their financial circumstances or their, you know, mum and dad's job or whatever. Public transport, I think, is the gateway to opportunity, isn't it? And we're on the cusp actually of a public transport system outside of London that is the dream that we wanted, an integrated system.
Mm-hmm. Is this your most? Is this the thing you're the most proud of in terms of achievement so far as mayor?
It is, because I remember when the buses in Greater Manchester were deregulated by a certain Prime Minister called Margaret Thatcher, of whom I was not particularly fond. I was 16 or something when she just said, oh no rules anymore, no public ownership. Anyone can run buses, they can go anywhere. This is going to be marvellous. It's going to make the fares cheaper, there'll be more choice, there'll be more routes, the buses will be better. Go forward 30 or so years when I arrive as mayor, passenger numbers had halved. So we used to have 200 million journeys a year, it was 100 million. The routes had shrunk right back because they just chopped everything. The commercial model just chopped it all back. A single bus fare in Manchester when I arrived as mayor was over £4, one journey. Yeah, because they were just playing it for the money. And you know, whatever side of politics people are in the room on, you know, there are some areas that need strong regulation if they're to work in the public interest. Deregulation, I hear the kind of mantra of it, you know, deregulation, privatization. It is a recipe, in my view, for the private vested interest to triumph over the wider.
We're about to find out in the States.
And buses in Manchester are a complete case study of that. The first year of the B network, buses were back under public control, where we controlled the fare box and we paid the private companies to provide the service. It was the first year of growth in passenger numbers in 40 years since Margaret Thatcher deregulated. So I am proud of that. I am absolutely proud to be the first mayor to put buses back under public control. But I think this says something about the essentials of life: homes, buses, trains, water, electricity. These things have to be under, in my view, strong public control to get the price down, make them affordable to everybody. And sadly, the privatizations of the 1980s in the UK left us with the opposite. We have a situation where water was privatized, and now we have sewage in the rivers and the seas because they haven't put the infrastructure in to stop the overflow of sewage into our water courses. That I'm afraid, is what privatization and deregulation done. And don't hear from me that I'm anti-business or, you know, hopelessly left and idealistic. That is just the lived experience of Greater Manchester. It's left poorer residents even poorer, and people without the essentials.
How have you engaged the private sector in Manchester in terms of helping you to solve some of these challenges?
We do it hugely and really successfully. They are absolutely with us, side by side. You know, in this room and certainly on this visit, we have employers overseeing our plans for technical education. You know, we have to have a business-led, employer-led education system, and we're giving them a real leading role in doing that. Yeah, Greater Manchester has always had a kind of really pro-enterprise, pro-business culture, and I keep that as mayor. It's absolutely critical. But you know, we also though build a kind of culture of businesses as corporate citizens as well. You know, not just pursuing the quick pound, but you know, working with us to support the conditions of their employees. We have a Greater Manchester Good Employment Charter. So we've created a charter that we're now asking businesses to adopt, which is about, you know, ending insecure work, giving people a real living wage. That's the kind of way we work, and businesses come with us on that journey. We're really proud of our relationship with business.
So talk to us a little bit about your greatest disappointment. So we've heard the great things, the things that are going well, the transportation system, the collaboration, thinking regionally. You know, what's been one of your disappointments, and maybe what are the lessons learned from that?
The biggest would be what we tried to do around clean air. And I was looking in the library, you know, clean air was one of President Johnson's achievements. It's not that we're not cleaning up the air. We are, because the transport system, we're just, electric buses are coming to service every day in Greater Manchester. We will have a fully net zero transport system at street level by 2030. Every single bus will be electric. Our trams already run on renewable energy, so a zero emission public transport system by the end of this decade, which is, you know, a great thing. And that will clean up the air. But we went at it, I think now, with hindsight, the wrong way. We were going to have a clean air zone. Now, you know what, imagine this in Texas, if you were putting forward a policy that everyone had to pay a tax if your vehicle wasn't, clean enough every day on your way to work. You know,
it would not fly, my friend. It would not fly here.
Mayor Watson, well, he's not standing again, is he? Yeah. But he wouldn't be returned, I'm sure. But I mean, but even in our context, it wasn't right. But to be fair to us, it was kind of foisted on us by the previous government. They lost a court case against an environmental group, and they almost just forced us. You've just got to clean up this air, and you've got to do it as quickly as possible. We're not going to really help you, or some funding. Anyway, we put together a scheme. We excluded cars because we knew that would, but we also thought buses, taxis, HGVs, lorries, well, they're transport businesses, so they really should be investing in modern vehicles. But vans were the issue. Your painter, decorator, your window cleaner, your plumber, you know, the van is just to do their job. And they just didn't have the money post-pandemic to change. So, you know, I pulled the plug on it and said, you know, we just can't do this. Although it was hard. And the learning is this. I mean, I kind of thought a lot about this, and you know, I hear the talk here now in the US about abandon net zero, or you know, go cold on it.
Yep.
We're not like that. Greater Manchester's always faced the future. For us, the future is net zero, zero emission economy. We're on a path to that by 2038, and we won't be deflected. We think future prosperity comes from being an early adopter in that space. Absolutely. However, here's the thing. How do you get from where we are in 2025 to a net zero city region by 2038? I don't think you get there with bans, taxes, charges, lectures. I just don't think, and this is the learning. Because then it just looks like there's an entitled middle-class group of politicians lecturing the public on, you know, sometimes lower incomes that you know best, and they just, you know, you don't get hearts and minds around it. You get there with carrots, not sticks. You get there with cheap public transport that makes life better for them because they use it, and then it's cheaper than running a car. You get there with green homes. Homes not just cheaper to rent, but cheaper to run in terms of the bills that you pay for your electricity. That you get to net zero by lowering the cost of living for ordinary people, and you get them with the thing, and then it moves faster because people can buy into it then because you're helping them. You know, there's a route to net zero could leave us with an even less equal society.
Yep.
And I think that would be a really bad place to get to. But there's also a route to it which gets you to a fairer society at the end of it. And I like to think now, having learned on this journey, that's the path that Greater Manchester is on.
Cool. So you have a relationship. This weekend, you and Mayor Watson announced a relationship together, the city of Manchester and the city of Austin, an exchange of ideas. Why Austin, Texas? Like, what do you think that you learned from? What will Manchester learn from here in Austin after being here for a week and spending some time with the mayor? And you've been here a couple times, but why Austin?
When I got elected, everyone said to me, "You got to get over to Austin." But, you know, I'm big on my music. I don't know. Do we have any Manchester music fans? Do anyone? Yeah, a few. Okay. Well, my era was the Smiths in the 80s. I saw the Smiths at Salford University in 1986. The Stone Roses, New Order, brought New Order to South by actually in 2023. I'm very dug in the Manchester music scene, but lots of people in that said, get over to Austin. There used to be a conference in Manchester called In the City, and I know the founders of South by used to go to In the City every year. So they told me, they said, get over to Austin and go and persuade them, because they know Manchester, because they used to come to our conference, tell them to have North by Northwest in Manchester as the European version. And I did. I got on a plane and I went to see them and I said, how about it? And they said, no. So I got on a plane and went home again. Wasn't quite like that, obviously. We had a chat and they were very helpful actually in terms of how I might develop something similar. We have a music conference called Beyond the Music now, which is going to be something. So, in fact, we're going to have South by is going to London later this year, but we have a roadshow, and so we have a great relationship with South by. But then when I came and I was like looking around, thinking, this really feels like our place. The housing growth, the young people, tech, and that is Manchester. That you wouldn't believe the crossover for those who've not been, you wouldn't believe it. And then I was kind of going out through the airport on that first trip. I'm thinking, keep Austin weird. Look at that. That's a fun. I brought a T-shirt for my son, and and then I was like, well, it's a bit like us because our slogan is "This is Manchester. We do things differently here." So there's a bit of a similar vibe going on there. Then back on my last visit, Austin FC, and they're a soccer city as well. I like so. And by the way, Mayor Watson's coming to Manchester next year. I don't know if you picked up this news, but hopefully with a big Austin delegation. My mission when I get home is to persuade Manchester City or Manchester United to play Austin in Manchester next year. So whether I can do that or not, so the point is music city, soccer city, fast-growing city, digital and tech hub. But also, what I was trying to say before, a city that I think has got its heart on its sleeve. It's kind of got the right values for me about a place where everyone is, everyone's involved, inclusive, everyone's part of it. I just pick up the same vibe here. So that's a long answer to why Austin. It's got to be Austin, isn't it? It's a relationship we're going to be really invested in, and it will be wonderful to see what comes of that return visit next year.
Cool. We'll talk a little bit about the book really quickly before we open it up for some questions for the audience. So you talked a little bit about why you wrote the book. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about what inspired you to write the book? And we'll do two parts. What inspired you? And as we look at the book, what do you hope we take away from it?
So it was that political journey. And the Mayor of Liverpool was on that kind of a campaign with me to get justice for Hillsborough, for the Hillsborough families. So we went on that journey together. And I think that journey took us into the dark corners of the British state, if I could put it that way. Mm-hmm. We saw the cover-up. We saw agents of that cover-up trying to keep it going in the British Parliament, and we described that in the book. So we've been on this path together. We decided to leave Westminster together, deliberately, to say, we can't change this system from the inside because the party whip system doesn't let you challenge the kind of norms of British politics, and you can't change that political. So we shook hands on it in a pub after a vote in the House of Commons. We were both MPs, and we said, right, we're leaving. We're going to take up these new jobs, and we're going to stand together, because that wasn't a thing at the time. Liverpool and Manchester, and we're going to raise our voices back at them together, and we're going to try and change this country from the outside. And here we are, 8 years on from that journey, which the book has also started to describe. And I think it is fundamentally changing. The government that has come in, gathered the mayors in Downing Street 2 or 3 days within. We have a Hillsborough law about to be brought in by the British government in respect of what we were campaigning on. And think about this, that law is going to put into statute in the UK a duty of candour on all police and public servants. I don't know if this exists here.
No, we do not.
But I can tell you it's needed. It's needed in the UK. Tell the truth at the first time of asking. It's not a lot to ask, is it, of a public servant? You would think, would you not, that they do that every day when they come into work? It's sometimes not their fault. It's the systems that they work in. Don't let them tell the truth at first time of asking. A quick anecdote. I was the UK Health Secretary in 2009 under Gordon Brown, and I was receiving a similar justice campaign from people who'd had infected blood that had come from the US. So this was blood products that had been created with donors from the prison system.
Yep.
You'll probably be familiar with that. And the US, to be fair, was warning the UK in the 70s and 80s about these blood products. In 2009, I was told by senior civil servants in the Department of Health that nobody in the UK was knowingly given an unsafe blood product. That was a lie. And I was the Secretary of State for Health in Gordon Brown's cabinet. So that change, the Hillsborough Law, is the type of change that Britain needs, and what Steve and I left Parliament to campaign for. More devolution. So that is a big rebalancing of the state to empower the individual over the state. More devolution to all parts of England. The north of England, by May, will have 100% devolution arrangements. Again, a massive change. We're beginning to see the changes that we called for. The House of Lords it's not going to where we want. 2025, half of the British Parliament is still unelected. Can you believe that? And those unelected people making the laws of everybody largely live inside the M25, inside the Beltway in your terminology. Again, can you actually imagine that in this country? Unelected people, appointed people. Can you? Oh, you seem to be. Believe me,
have you heard
not as bad as the House of Lords.
Have you heard of Elon Musk, by the way?
Sorry, I realized that. Yeah.
We're all living that.
I get you now.
We're all living that right now. So let's do this, y'all. Let's take some questions from the audience. I'll ask this. Name who you are and ask a question, not a statement. We'll ask for a question, not a statement, just where we can try to get through as many of these as possible. You don't mind taking audience questions?
I have loads.
I love it too. Let's do it.
Hello, I'm R.D. Childers. There's a lot of things on the political theater right now that are dividing us. As a young man in England in your teenage years, what was your favorite song from the United States?
From the United States? Oh, I used to be quite in.
That was a softball question.
Huh?
That was a softball question.
I know. I'm very soft. I like it. I like doing events here. It's like, I was into something called Sub Pop. Does anybody know that? That was a record label out of Seattle, and I think was quite connected to Manchester. The movement was going like. So I liked all of those bands, but the one I would pick out would be Sonic Youth. It would be. I'm trying to remember the title is Daydream.
You're talking to someone who has no pop culture reference, by the way.
You don't know what I mean. It's a fantastic song. God, I can't remember the title of it now. It's there.
It was a hard question then.
Pardon? It is. While I'm talking, I will find out the name of this song, because if you don't know it, huh? Daydream Nation. What am I on about? Daydream Nation.
Nice job. Nice job.
Is it a good song or not? What? Yeah, to get your approval. So that's your task for today, everybody. Sonic Youth, Daydream Nation. Give it a play.
That's our soundtrack for today. Okay, great. We'll go over here.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for being here. My name is Carla Burrell. My question is kind of a two-parter. How does your transportation system address or even reconcile affordable housing and immediate gentrification along transportation alignments and stations as a result of rail and other transport extensions that you were talking about? And then also, if you can talk a bit about the new technical education pathway as an alternative to university and creating a new Live Well service in Manchester.
Thank you. Oh, thank
Two great questions. So,
Yeah, excellent. So Bev Craig and I are very conscious that gentrification can easily take over a city like Manchester or indeed Austin.
particularly as you make public investments.
Yeah, and maybe to a degree is happening as cities become more successful. That can push people out of cities. And the danger is you lose the magic of what made them successful. Austin, because of its spirit and its unique vibe, you kind of in the end kill that if you're not careful, if you don't control it. So we're really focused on this. And the answer actually is what transport allows you to do. If you take a transport system and then really reimagine housing around its nodes, you can get higher density, more affordable development, based in and around the stations or the tram stops. And that's what we're trying to do. So, build for young people who don't want to own a car, put them right close to we've got a place called Stockport where we've kind of pioneered that model. And that's what I did indeed recommend to Mayor Watson. I think, when you don't just plan the line, plan what's going to go along the line. And, that absolutely is a model of growth that I would recommend. On the second point, one of the things that I'm very proud of the Labour government I served in under Tony Blair, but one of the mistakes was that government set a target for university attendance of 50% of the population, 50% of kids. And in itself was a great thing. The problem is it never said anything about the other 50%. It didn't seem to have a story for them. And then that's carried on. There's a snobbery in English education where it's always obsessed on the university route. It's built the whole education system for that route, the academic route, and has absolutely not served the needs of young people who want technical qualifications and a technical pathway. So as Mayor of Greater Manchester, I am trying to fix this. I have a reform called the Greater Manchester Baccalaureate. The idea is, in as simplest terms, by 2030, I want every teenager in Greater Manchester in their middle teenage years to be able to apply for a high-quality work placement at a Greater Manchester company and then map out a pathway towards that with all of the qualifications and support, and maybe get to the same level of qualification, a degree apprenticeship, which, I think something similar you can do here. We were at Austin Community College on Saturday.
I was going to say that we've got some great examples of that here.
Oh, I was really inspired by them. Free tuition, by the way. They need I would say, a round of applause for what they're doing there. I think the first community college in the US to make technical pathways free from the tuition point of view. And that mirrors very much. The mayor has launched something called the Infrastructure Academy.
I know that very well.
Again, that mirrors very much what we are hoping to do. And just a last point, if I may, there's a political point here. There's a political point. I think this is particularly true of politicians on the left. They look like they are university-educated metropolitan people who only obsess on that. They then talk about that incessantly. And I think this is part of the left's problem. There'll be families, let's say blue-collar families here or in Manchester, say, when are they going to start talking about my kids? What about them? What ambition have they got? And they haven't been. And I think this reform also goes to deal with some of the problems of the left of politics, which, has lost connection with some of those families. And if you need to start setting high ambitions for their kids, but they don't hear politicians talking about their kids. And that's what this reform is meant to do. It's really 2 equal paths at 14. One academic, one technical. I am not in any way minimizing the university route. It's brilliant for those who want to take it, but you need an equal path for kids towards technical qualifications. And in the UK, and I think here in the US, if you do it with a placement with an employer, you can get the same degree level qualification, but without the debt. And there are many kids in Greater Manchester for whom that is a brilliant option. 2/3 of our kids at the moment don't take the traditional university route, and I'm determined, absolutely determined, to do more for them. And I'm taking inspiration from Austin Community College as I go back. It is my new priority as I've completed the public.
It could be it could be as game-changing as your public transit system.
I see it that way. Yeah, absolutely. Because, again, on that gentrification point, low-cost public transport, education available and training, housing, lower cost, those things are the basis of a fairer society.
Yep, great. Thank you for those questions. We'll go to the next folks. We'll go. Who's got the mic?
I have the mic.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Hello, I'm Mary Kay Hansen. I'm from Austin, and thank you for coming. You're kind of a hero of me because I'm real interested in transportation. And I would like to know your timeline on getting B going and how many years it took. We voted for Project Connect here. I don't know how many years ago, and we don't have much to show for it. We tend to kind of talk things to death, and then when you want to, start on your project, all of a sudden your dollars have dwindled away, and the cost has gone up. So how did you get that going, and would you share that with somebody here?
Well, to Project Connect's defense, a lot has actually happened with Project Connect.
Yeah.
That project has moved along.
Yeah.
It's faced some stiff headwinds from political challenges here in the state. But talk a little bit about, from your system and that system and the change that you had, what time horizon are we talking? Right, because one of the things I always tell my students, Mayor, is that economic development, urban transformation doesn't happen overnight. It takes a while. It takes a long time.
It does. It's 10 years. So in 2015, there was a Conservative Chancellor called George Osborne who wanted elected mayors in Britain. Greater Manchester at the time didn't necessarily want one because there's more of a culture of working together and not one person. And so in the end, the highly pragmatic leaders of Greater Manchester, who always played a tough hand of cards, even when I was a minister, shook hands with George Osborne on the basis that he could have his elected mayor if he gave them the power to re-regulate the buses. And that was basically what they shook hands on. And whenever I was pontificating in my early years as mayor and on this issue, health, education, they often used to say to me, you've got one job in life, re-regulate the buses, and we don't want to hear from you on anything else. But I took that one job very seriously. So I set on using these powers that came from the UK Parliament. And I then was challenged. I was the first mayor to take a decision to re-regulate, having gone through all the process, and there had to be consultations and all this kind of thing. I took a decision coming out of the pandemic in March 2021 that we would re-regulate the buses. And it's basically a week on Monday, or 2 weeks today, that we will finally have achieved our dream, which is controlling the buses and the trams together, and now uniting them in one system that's low-cost, tap-in, tap-out system. 10 years. And the reason why it took so long is all of those private bus companies took me all the way to the High Court. They did everything in their power. They had that fare box, and they wanted to keep that fare box. And they fought me all the way to the High Court, but we eventually defeated them. And there we are, a decade.
Thank you. Great question. Who else has got the mic now? We'll go over there.
My name is Annie. I wanted to ask about something that you've been talking about the whole time, which is the devolutionary reforms that have happened since New Labour was elected, especially. I wanted to hear a little bit more about your historical perspective on those changes and why a major party would adopt that as a plank.
Yeah. It's a great question. Can I offer a little context? In the Texas sense, we're moving away from devolution of power, by the way. What we're starting to see more and more is particularly in our state, where the state government is starting to take the power away from cities, particularly as it relates to housing and real estate. Part of the issues with transportation that you mentioned earlier. You are in, if we were to talk, politics-wise, a very small blueberry in a very red sea.
Yeah.
And there has been a push at our state capitol to pull power from cities and counties, local areas like yourself, and consolidate it at the state level. So it's a really interesting,
Quite alive.
I fundamentally think it is the issue that cities are dealing with here in Texas.
I mean, the devolution that the Labour government did was quite top-down still. It was to Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and London. It created a devolution model in London, which actually I don't think works particularly well because it's a layer and it doesn't relate to the councils individually. It's in my view anyway. But that was the Labour government, and it was still quite a top-down model. So in Scotland, where nationalism of a sort of different kind has sort of been prominent for the last 10 or so years, they hoovered the power up as well because they wanted to build brand Scotland so they could break away from the UK. They wanted to get everyone behind the flag, the Scottish flag. So they're Police Scotland, Fire Scotland, would you believe it, nationally run services. So that was the devolution that we had then. The difference of Greater Manchester is we've pioneered bottom-up devolution, where it's coming from the bottom up at city region level. And I think it has to be the future in terms of the dysfunctional politics of our time. I think the reason we have a difficult political scene here in the US and in the UK is because a lot of places feel neglected. They feel out of what's happening, not getting the investment that they need. Devolution of power gives them agency to do something about those things. Kind of a bit of muscle that they don't.
It puts their place first.
It puts their place first, and that I think is its strength. And for me, I would say the US would go in the wrong direction if it does that, because cities are where the new ideas come through. Cities are where business meets university, and the research happens, the innovation happens. The change comes first through cities, doesn't it? So you empower the change makers, don't you, in any economy? And I think in the 21st century, it is the cities that should come more and more to the fore, because when you've got a kind of a place-first approach, city to city across the world, then I think you've got a more functional, cities go to practical things first, countries go to political things first, and you get all the tension that comes with that. I think, the United Nations was the 20th century thing. It should be United Cities in the 21st century, because that would create a sort of counterpoint to fractious, divided national politics. So absolutely empower more and more is what I would say, in terms of the devolution. And I think that would bring the change. I was struck by something when I came in as mayor, that the US Conference of Mayors in the first Trump presidency had voted back into the Paris Agreement as cities after nationally the country had been withdrawn. And that, for me, that was the biggest statement of power by local government that I had ever heard in my life. I was really energized by that. And I personally would say we need more of that. Cities need to collaborate more and challenge national governments in the UK, the US. We need a lot more of that, I think.
Yeah, a lot of people look at Texas and you point to the growth horizon that we had in the last decade, and folks would say that because this was a state for such a long time that formulated government at the local level, meaning local engaged with public and private sector, was this interesting mix of experimentation. Unfortunately, as was noted in the question, or as I added to your question, it's something that we're seeing less and less of, where we're starting to see a much more top-down approach. And frankly, one of the challenging things in our state is that our state government's not built to handle that type of governance either. We're just not staffed in that type of way from an agency standpoint. And so much of the expertise that requires to run cities are at the local level.
I don't want to wade into politics here, but I can't.
Why not?
When a politician says something like that, it's always like you were about to, though. I would own any move to deprive a city of a power that it's already got, in my view, is a political move. It's designed to silence a voice, stop positive progress, stop the tram system from expanding, or it's it's a political move, not a move with the interests of the people at its heart. Because the more power is closer to people, I think it's better used, basically. The closer the power is to the ground, it's used better the closer to the ground. And I could, where power has been pushed out and down, anyone who takes it back up, like in Scotland, they are making a political move without the interests of the people at heart.
So let's imagine that you decide to return back south, perhaps, in a national role. How do you take these lessons learned, and how does your experience influence maybe the next thing you do?
I personally believe the British state needs completely rewiring, top to bottom. I describe it in the book, me and Steve, as it's like an antiquated country house that you might have seen in a film about England, sort of upstairs, downstairs, Downton Abbey, where the power is on in one room, in the drawing room, but everything else is dark and creaky. And that's kind of Britain, I'm afraid, is the reasons why it's not working as it should, is because the political system doesn't send light and power through the whole of the UK. And so we call for a British constitution. We don't have a written constitution. You believe it? Britain. 5 countries in the world don't have one, and the other list is not great. It's the kind of people that the US voted with at the United Nations a couple of weeks ago.
Now you're getting political.
You don't want to be on. Yeah, sorry, I am. You don't want to be on that list, I don't think. But anyway, that's a power move, isn't it? The powerful, the rich, the wealthy, the establishment hold power when there's no written constitution. A written constitution empowers individual citizens, as you know, here better than us. We say a written constitution with a British basic law based on Germany. Germany has a basic law in its written constitution that says what? It says this, that there must be equivalent living standards between all of the 16 Länder of Germany. And if we had had a constitution like that with a law like that, Britain would be a fundamentally different place today than it is. But I would also go to a system of voting reform, proportional representation, not first past the post for the Commons. I would abolish the House of Lords and have an elected Senate of the nations and regions. I would have maximum devolution of power out of Westminster. I would have a Hillsborough law. I would have a Grenfell law, which is about a safe home as a fundamental human right enshrined in UK law. You can be nothing in life, nothing at all, without a good home. Finland has done something amazing where they have a national housing first philosophy. Housing first. Nothing else works if you've not got good housing. You can't have good health without good housing. You can't have good education for your kids without good housing. Housing is the best investment the public sector could make. And I would want Britain to be a housing-first country where everyone is guaranteed a good, safe home. That would be transformative, I think, in terms of people's prospects. So, yeah, I've got some ideas about what I would do if I went back to Westminster.
Okay.
Not to be political.
We've got time for about 2 more questions. Right here, in the front.
So I think right now, this is a very interesting message to hear, because when I think of devolution in the U.S., sorry, Andrew Rogers. When I think of devolution in the U.S., my fears are ignited because of these ultra rich wanting to establish new nation states. How can you help explain, like, everything you're saying is great about what's happened, and I'm afraid that there's a group of people who would use that message to say, you should give us a billionaire control over a city because look what we can do when we can have all this power. What keeps the democracy alive in Greater Manchester?
It's a great question.
It's a great question, very of the moment. So I am the mayor of Greater Manchester, but I don't, kind of sit there passing edicts and what were the things that were being signed? The
executive orders.
I don't sit there signing executive orders because Bev won't let me. Is that right? The point, there's a serious point. I'm one of 11. I'm captain of 11, if I could put it that way. soccer team is 11, I'm captain of 11, because I have 10 councils, and they will not let me use unfettered power. And this is why our model is superior to London. London is the mayor of London, separate, above the councils, but not with a direct relationship with them. Whereas our model is, they basically I have to get them with me before we do anything. And if Mr. Musk fancies running Greater Manchester, he would have to get past Bev Craig. So he couldn't just come in as a billionaire and sort of, the system is built with checks and balances right in it.
We thought ours was too.
Yeah, it still may hold. Last question in the back.
Hi, Angela Paxia. Just to follow up with this question, because this has been on my mind for the past couple of days, actually, to ask you, because right now we're living in a time where the access to information, who controls information controls the narrative. And so while there is this evolution of, giving back and letting it be more of a grounds up approach, those people are looking at certain media to find out what they need to be thinking about, how they need to be thinking, especially in light of recent issues that the UK has had. I have family there. They're from India. And, they feel very comfortable in London, but going outside of London, things feel very different. So with that in mind, knowing there's been racial challenges and issues, and that's been exploited recently by the mentioned name I won't mention again. How do you address this? Because people do want to listen. I was in Manchester actually last year, and I was struck up a conversation with the hotel tenant. And she was going on about how she loved Joe Rogan, and that the politics is there. The people are listening. It's everywhere. And how do you change that? I mean, you're elected official, but at the same time, you don't control the narrative. How do you deal with that?
So it's really hard, as you know. And I'm almost now 25 years an elected politician, which is a long time. I believe politics has got harder every single year that I've been elected. Harder. And it's worse in 2025 than ever I can remember in terms of people elected, in my view, shouldn't incite division and hate between. Your moral responsibility is to lead and lead safely and give space for everyone to be able to come together and build the bridge in society. But we don't have that now, do we? And we have a system of social media that is kind of pouring petrol on the inflammatory statements of people in the political world. So your question is a wonderful one. Let me give you a really, hopefully a good example of how I try. And I say try because I'm not going to claim I'm succeeding necessarily well, but I do try. We have something in the UK called Black History Month. I don't know if you have it here, but we do. There's a lot of people who say, when's White History Month? The people attack the very concept of it. But I lean into it, and I won't be deflecting on, as mentioned, net zero, I won't be deflecting on that, and I won't be deflecting at all on what you would call DEI here, but we call it inclusive Greater Manchester. I decided in 2024, Black History Month, to take a group of kids from a primary school in Manchester. Is it Divine Mercy, Bev? Where Manchester City, the old City ground. Yeah, Divine Mercy. Mainly young black kids. I decided to take them on a walk through Manchester. And I had a video first week, and we took them on a walk. And we went first to somewhere called the Free Trade Hall, which was a massive meeting space in Manchester. And I took them to the plaque on the wall. And the plaque on the wall at the Free Trade Hall, it's a hotel now, but the old building's still there, tells the story of how in 1862, when Manchester was called Cottonopolis, your cotton from here came to us via the port of Liverpool to be woven into cloth in Manchester. in the modern industrial machinery of Manchester that nowhere else in the world had, actually. That's where we were at that time. But at the Free Trade Hall in 1862, the workers, the cotton workers of Manchester, got together and they discussed the situation here that was going on at that time. And they voted that night that they would not handle slave-picked cotton. Now, if you think about that, the kind of humble circumstances in which those people live, it's an incredible thing, isn't it? And I was explaining to the kids as we were talking about this story, imagine they had nothing, these people. Absolutely nothing. They were working, I think, 7 days in those mills, going back to the most basic of homes. And they still took that vote. And if you read the resolution that they passed that night, you should. As Americans, it will inspire you because they talk about your country. And it is truly inspiring. People thousands of miles away that they would never know. And that's what they did. So then the walk carried on, and we went to the statue of Abraham Lincoln that is in Lincoln Square, newly refurbished by Bev and the City Council. And there you will find on the statue Lincoln's letter back to the working men of Manchester, where he praised, in his words there, sublime Christian heroism. And it is, I get a little emotional because it is emotional, isn't it? It's, that is amazing. And these kids were there with me. And I was telling them that story. And you can imagine the kind of impact on them. The video goes up. And the abuse, your kids, and the abuse comes pouring into it. But you know what? I kind of saw all that. And it told me that I'd done something. Because they could only abuse it and attack. Because I told, and here's my answer. Tell the story of who we were, where we came, what we were about. Speak to the soul of Manchester. That's and that soul of Manchester is that place that is about our common humanity, our equality. Those humble workers, I say to people, these were your ancestors, and they did that. They said Black Lives Matter in 1862. It's unbelievable history. If you're not inspired by it, I don't know what kind of unfeeling kind of human being you must be. But I think told me that tell the story of who we are, where we've come from, where progress is made, and I think that is my best answer to you. I'm not saying it is an answer fully, but I think it's my best answer to you. And I've really been inspired by you all being here today and listening. I kind of feel this conversation does help us think of a way forward. We are in difficult and divided times, aren't we? But I actually feel it's people to people, place to place that builds back in the 21st century and will take us through this period back to a better place. If it's all done through the prism of national politics, well, we'll go darker and darker, and things will get worse and worse. So you build back from the bottom up, don't you? That's how you build back. And the more people have power closer to them, the more they can use it, the more they can build a fairer society. So thank you so much, all of you, for listening today. Thank you for having me.